Okay, welcome back for the afternoon session, and we're going to start off looking at social media collecting. Both Brendan and Sean will speak, and then we'll have questions combined afterwards because there's likely to be some overlap in the questions as well. But firstly, I'd like to introduce Brendan Soames, who's Collection Strategy Specialist looking at published shared collecting.
Hi everyone, I'm going to be talking about digital publications and how about we're collecting some of these things at the library and also what assistance they may be to you. So the first thing I want to mention is a service called the National E-Deposit Service, which is short for, or is long for, NED. And what this will be doing is that it will be a service that starts on Thursday that will enable Australian publishers to deposit their legal deposit digital publications. So it's an expansion of the National Library's e-deposit service, but what this service is doing is that it's being developed by all the NSW libraries, the National State Territory Libraries of Australia, and it will enable Australian publishers to satisfy their legal deposit requirements for digital publications to those libraries by going to this one-stop shop. And so once they deposit there, the publications will become available in accordance with the Copyright Act, in accordance with legal deposit laws, and what publishers want in terms of access. So that's all really exciting stuff. So that will launch on Thursday. So that's kind of going to be our go-to mechanism for how we collect digital publications. So in terms of what publications can be collected through there, the categories are monographs, serials, music scores and maps in the various formats that are listed there. What publications? They have to be subject to legal or government deposits, so they have to be Australian publishers subject to those laws. The publications cannot have any digital rights management on them. We have a bulk deposit functionality available, so at the National Library, a number of commercial publishers deposited with them and they're now available through NED, their back catalogue of materials, so there is a bulk deposit functionality, and we can also set it up so that emails are accepted. So we get a lot of newsletters from family history groups, local community groups, etc., where we're just on a subscription list. The NED service can enable us to basically subscribe to that list and then process what is in the content of the email automatically. So what use is NED, I suppose, for public libraries? If a publication is of interest, and you said, or whatever, it meets the NED criteria, so the criteria that I've mentioned before, advise the publisher to go to NED and deposit that. So we really want publishers to use that. So if there's a really good community publication that's about and you're in contact with the publisher, feel free to tell them to go deposit it to NED if they haven't used it already. If the publisher allows, the publication will be freely available. So generally speaking, what is happening is that commercial publishers, for commercial reasons, are reticent to provide access freely available to everyone. They generally go for on-site access at individual libraries. But there's a lot of non-commercial publications where publishers will be fine and happy for it to be freely available. So if it's a New South Wales publication, it'll become available through our catalogue. And everything, all the content that's deposited into the NED service from all around Australia will be available at Trove and searchable in Trove, but also viewable where access conditions allow. So that's kind of a really interesting service. What it's getting to is that digital publications is about shared collecting. So digital is totally different from print. You can deposit it once somewhere and then make it available everywhere else. So it's totally different to print. And so that I think, looking into my crystal ball, I think that what will happen in the future is that digital publications will be about shared collecting. If you have any questions about NED, there's an email address and there's also a website. It's there, ned.gov.au, that's the website. And so that has information about the formats, what categories of material, etc., can be deposited to Ned. So that's all really exciting. Going on to the next type of publication, websites. So the State Library collects websites in two ways. We use a tool called Archivit, which is an Internet Archive web harvesting tool, and that enables us to capture a large amount of websites. We also use the National Library's tool Pandora. So Pandora is kind of a collaborative web collecting tool. So we use that. And why we use two tools is that Archivit enables us to do large-scale harvesting of material. So we have harvested the newsouthwales.gov.au domain. So we've done an amount of website collecting there. And the material is available here. This work? Oh, yes, it should. So it's available if you go to Archivit and then look at the organisation State Library of New South Wales. You'll find there's information about New South Wales government information. We've harvested at a kind of ministry level. And so you can see all the various, and we've done that for about the last 5 years. So there's a lot of material there, and similarly with local government as well. So we've harvested an amount of council local government websites between 2015 and 2018. So that's what Archivit enables us to do, to really do large-scale harvesting of web material. In terms of Pandora, so this is the collaborative web collecting tool that developed by the National Library, used by national and state libraries, used by a few other cultural institutions. The websites are available via catalogues and viewable in Trove. This here is a collection that we've just collected recently relating to the 2019 state election. So you can go to the website there and see the various candidates that we've collected. I'm not sure if you're aware that the National Library's done a lot of work recently in how they make their website collections available. So there's been a lot of work done on that. So here, for example, is a Twitter account of a candidate at the state election. So there are our two tools that we use to collect websites. So what use are these tools? I suppose, if you have any suggestions about what to collect, what websites, if there's really good websites you think are really interesting, feel free to send them to that address there, collections@sl.nsw.gov.au. It's best to get permission to archive the website, so that's one thing we will generally ask for. The National Library, because it has the Commonwealth legislation, can archive websites without permission, but generally they're not accessible to anyone. If you go and ask the website owner permission and get their approval to make it accessible, then it's generally a better outcome for the public because they can actually see it. So that's kind of just, where we are happy to, if you send us suggestions, websites, etc. of interest, that we can then look into archiving those using the two tools we have. In terms of social media, the last kind of category I want to speak to, Pandora and Archivit can collect social media accounts, but as we saw with that Labor candidate from the state election, it generally can only capture the account. We also use a tool to collect social media called VISI, which is, we've been working with Cyro Data 61 for about maybe 5 years on building this tool, which enables us to collect social media, but we can collect social media accounts. We can also collect keywords and hashtags, which I suppose is the key component. And it enables large-scale collecting of that, so you can collect on a very large scale. In terms of that material being available, we have some of it available. Anonymised aggregated content is available on our website. So under Research and Collections, Significant Collections, I think if you just Google Social Media Archive State Library, you should get here. And this is just material that's basically been collected now. A lot's been collected now. Anyway. There should be nice pictures there because there are things, analysing the content coming in, working out what emotions are there, are people sad, are people happy, are people angry, etc. So that's where we have the anonymised aggregated content available for all the social media we've been collecting. It is on our to-do list to work out how we make the actual granular level social media available and how we do that. So that's on our to-do list. And again, what use is this? Again, feel free to send us suggestions. So if there's something happening in your particular community area where it's a hashtag or something really interesting, feel free to send us a note and we can then look at capturing that discussion conversation. Email collections@sl.nsw.gov.au. That's the end for me. So I'm going to hand over to Sean and talk about social media tools and how you can archive your own collection.
Hello, I'm Sean Volk. I'm the Online Resources Specialist Librarian. I'm on Twitter, it's now X. I look after our resources, our web harvesting, and last year I took over social media from Brendan. Okay. Brendan's talked a bit about what we do with VISI. We use VISI for mostly ongoing large captures. It's always running. We put stuff in, it captures it, and keeps it. Happy days. Now, sometimes it's mostly ongoing. Sometimes it's really useful to be able to go back and capture something from a week ago. There's a few other tools around for those retrospective captures. One of those is Twark. This was developed by Documenting the Now in the US as part of capturing social media around Black Lives Matter and developing community engagement. Up front, this is the techie part of the day. This is the command line tool. As far as command line tools go, this one's pretty simple to set up and get going with. Okay. What does a tweet look like? A few people talk about metadata. This is a full tweet as captured by Twark. If you'd like, you can wait half an hour while you try and read all that. But I've highlighted a few key things. I think that's a bit more readable. The first bit in red is the tweet ID. This is the unique identifier of a tweet, and all tweets have one, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. Underneath is the tweet itself. I think this one's something about eggs or whatever. I can see the name of the tweeter or the tweet it's referring to. I can even see the software we're using, in this case Twitter for iPhone. Okay. Now, as I said, Twark generally capture over Twitter API somewhere between the last 6 to 10 days. So a couple of months ago, we had a bit of an incident. Happened on a Friday. Some teenager decided to egg a politician. On the Friday, I thought, yeah, interesting, whatever. Happened in Melbourne, not so much New South Wales. So I thought, I should probably mention we also capture. What I forgot to say at the start in our VISI captures, we also caught the state and federal elections, so we've been catching stuff around those as well. But this happened, I thought, yeah, egging, whatever. Over the weekend, it exploded. Egg everywhere. I think that's my last egg pun, but we'll see how it goes. It went huge, it went international. I thought, okay. Came in Monday morning, thought, yeah, I really should have put that in. So I thought, okay, I want Twark. I'll give Twark a go. So I hooked that in. Ran Twark with a search on the hashtag for Eggboy and sent it to a file called eggboy.json. And hit enter and waited. And I waited. And I waited. And I waited. And I finally gave up waiting. I went home, left the computer running overnight, and came back the next morning. Took about 9 hours to capture 3 days of tweets. Yeah, that was popular. Okay, this is almost as technical as I get. So the first slide has a bunch of file sizes. The one I've highlighted is the actual archive of those tweets, 2.5 gigabytes. That's a bit big. Remember, I mentioned earlier the tweet IDs. If you just pull out the tweet IDs, you get a 7 meg file, or 6.9 meg. That's much smaller. You can keep that in your pocket. Actually, these days you can probably get 2.5 gig in your pocket, but that's another story. Down the bottom, we have the line counts for those files. And as you can see, the line counts for the IDs and the main file are exactly the same. Now, what is that counting? That's counting how many tweets. 360,000 tweets in 3 days. Fantastic. Okay. This gets a little more confusing. I think I lied before when I said I was technical as I was going to get. This gets a little more technical. Dehydrate. How many people have been camping? Yeah, that's enough. Bushwalking. Oh, even more. When you're bushwalking, you're trying to lighten your load as much as possible. So when it comes to taking food, you might start off, as I did as a teenager, with maybe a few cans of things and whatever. Eventually you discover dehydrated food, where somebody's gone to the troll, sucked out all the water, all that sort of thing, and you have this really nice light package. That's called dehydration. Some people actually do it themselves at home these days. You can buy off-the-shelf products. It's fab. So dehydration, we can also do that with tweets. So you want to dehydrate via Twark. Again, Twark, dehydrate is what we're doing. The file we're doing it on, and the file we want to put all stuff into. So that took that 2.5 gig file, ripped out all the tweet IDs, and gave us a 7 meg file. Cool, nice and easy. Now, when you get to your campsite, you start cooking. You want to put the water back in. You do a process called hydration. So it's there, put the water in, comes out okay. Might not be as good as it originally was, but it's mostly there. And so suddenly we end up with these. Our hydrated file looks a bit smaller. A bit smaller. So suddenly we're missing about 40,000 tweets. Now I should say here the time frames, because I've worked out all the dates off this. The Eggboy thing happened in March, and I ran the dehydration last week. So in 2 months, we've lost 40,000 tweets. Now what's happened to those tweets? Well, a few things. One, technical glitch. 2, somebody may have deleted their tweets. They thought, oh dear, I've been tweeting about phase learning, or I've been tweeting about eggs, or something. Whatever reason. So those tweets no longer exist. They existed 2 months ago, they don't exist now. They may have switched their account to private. There's a whole bunch of reasons why people will go from public to private and back again. You might be all public, and then suddenly you're going for a job interview, and then you make it private. Oh, I'm going too slow now. And so those are the reasons. Those are sort of some of the privacy issues we have to deal with, and also questions we have to make and think about in terms of making this stuff accessible. These are my headaches for the future. Twitter's terms and conditions says I can distribute the IDs, but not the tweets themselves. The downside of doing that is you have these sorts of gaps. What else can we do? There's other tools that come with Twark. Other people have written code for them in Python. Simple matter again, you won't run it with your source file. So this is the ubiquitous word cloud, which is that. Fairly straightforward. As I said, all you do is type that thing in, and that gives you a web page you can look at. Whole bunch of things, Fraser, a few references to New Zealand, because this all happened about a week after the Christchurch massacre. And that was the broader context of this event. So there's some other utilities there. Create a wall of your tweets. Network is sort of interesting because it outputs in a different format, which you can use in data visualization tools like Gephi. You can play with geocoordinates, do a filter by date, and sort of guesstimate gender of the tweeter. It's only really usually about 3 versions. It's a bit vague, so male, female, unknown. Doesn't really get the broad range there, and even within that, it's interesting. Okay, As I said, Twice on GitHub. It's free to use. You download and install. Does require a bit of command line at the moment. It runs in Python. It might be possible to get Python running in a Windows environment, or you can get Python running. I just haven't done it with Twark yet. Web Recorder, I haven't mentioned. Brendan talked a little about our web harvesting, large scale of archive it. I do all that as well. Web Recorder is the easy version. It does not require programming knowledge. You go to a website, all you need is a web browser, you log in, start a recording session like we're doing with Blue Jeans, and start clicking things. So if you want to save your local library's website, you would use that, go and click all the links, it'll save them all in the standard web archiving format. YouTube DL is great for just downloading video content. It'll strip off the website itself and get you all the videos. And we've used that a few times as well when we've been asked by historical societies to capture the YouTube feeds, because YouTube tends to be a bit harder to capture. Okay. Thank you very much.
Questions?
Yeah, sorry, question for Sean. You said you can make the identifier available but not the tweet. So in terms of the future, when will people be able to access the tweet?
I've dropped something and I don't know what I've dropped. Good, I've dropped the click. That is one of my future headaches. Important thing for us right now is making sure we have the content now for researchers in the future. That's the big thing. So even if we can't distribute or make access to those due to privacy reasons, we have at least saved the content. But Twitter IDs mean that we can potentially distribute some of the content. And that, as you said, we've lost 40,000 in 2 months, but we still have 340,000 there. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Sky from Bathurst Library. Excellent presentation today.
Thanks for getting me on.
That's not my question. I don't quite get the full scenario there, but with capturing those websites, is that capturing as a snapshot at that time?
Yes.
Or, okay, so if you were to log into one of them now, it would then go to a live website, or what was on it at that time that you did the scrape?
Hang on, the website. The website captures web recorder or web archive it?
Oh, I don't know, the one you were saying the New South Wales, the .gov.au.
Okay. That was the slide thing Brendan showed. It's a moment in time. We do regular captures, particularly all the New South Wales government ones we capture twice a year. And so what you'll do is you'll get a screen. I'll see if I can show it. There we go. Go into... I tend to default to Bankstown because I used to work there. This is what you get. These are each of the moments that Bankstown content was captured. There's a bit of doubling up there, so it tends to run a crawl and a patch crawl. So we've got 2 captures. If you go into that, you'll get that at that moment. In order to get going, say get it 6 months later, then you have to capture again. I hope this works. Sometimes they have display issues. Yep, there you go, Bankstown Library. So that's Bankstown Library in 2016. If I needed 2018, I'd have to go back and do the capture. Yep.
And it's also noticeable because it's Bankstown, not Canterbury Bankstown.
Yes, good point. Pre-merger.
Which we actually did deliberately try to catch.
I probably shouldn't admit this, but I actually did the original Bankstown Library website as well. And the entire site, I'm very proud to say, was in Comic Sans.
Hello, I'm Anna and you're in. I've got 2 questions. One which is, how do you decide what to capture? And do you actually capture the context You've got the tweets.
Yep.
Do you then do a slice of other media as well to give you the background information?
Okay. Late last year, I finished the collecting social media guidelines, which references our question development policy, and that outlines some of that material. We primarily focus on New South Wales and the border of Australia, and the various terms within that. And I actually created a working group last year to sort of suggest terms and things. So some of it's current interest, so something like Eggboy will get that popped up. But then we also try and make sure we're capturing regional events. We have a calendar of things that are happening throughout the state. Some of those might only ever generate 2 tweets, but we try and capture those because that's of significance to New South Wales and in accordance with our collection development policy. What's the second part again?
Slice of other social media.
With VISI, it's not just tweets. We're getting Twitter, Facebook, a little bit of Instagram, some YouTube. One of the things with my working group is I would like to actually look at how do we talk about the things we capture. So we're not really just capturing stuff. I know now, for example, when I go through and look at the monthly stats, I know that, say, the 18th of May was 18th of May was 18th April, I think it was, 18th of May. So, just doing this off the top of my head, was a really big day, and they're going, well, what happened that day? And I have to go and do a Google to find out what was big that day. I'd rather have that information handy. That particular day in question was when Bill Shorten was talking about his mum, and there's a whole bunch of tweets, people talking about their mums, and the stats just went through the roof. But it'd be really nice, instead of doing that retrospective, what the hell happened, we have some notes about why we've added things. Yes, not there yet, but it's something we need to do.
Hi, Anne-Marie from Penn. I'm interested, like a Flashback Friday thing where which lots of libraries have, where people, we put something up and people comment, and sometimes those comments actually provide us with extra information about those things that we had no idea happened, and I'm interested in knowing how to collect people's comments, I guess.
We're not with these collections, we're not really doing anything at the moment. I know in the past, so the library has a Flickr account, for example, where people have commented on photos, and then we've used those comments to enlarge our information about those photos. And that's certainly something we could do longer term when we make this more accessible.
Any other questions? Okay, please join me in thanking Sean and Brendan. And definitely use the email addresses that Brendan gave you to provide us with suggestions for our larger scale collecting, because that is accessible mostly for across the state, so it is valuable to be able to add that information. We're now going to hear from Jenna Bain, who'll be talking about enhancing the value of the digitised record. Some of you will have come across Jenna before, but please join me in welcoming her.
Okay, hi. So you've already heard quite a lot of examples today of some of the interesting and challenging work that we're doing in relation to digitising and digital collecting. And so the focus of my role here as digital projects leader is really about how we actually provide access to this material, whether it's online or through other digital platforms. So while the importance of this work cannot be understated, and the effort that we have put into, digitising our collections, for example, is obvious, digitising something doesn't make it automatically accessible. And so that's really what my focus has been over the last 5 years or so since I've been working here at the library. And it's more, and there's a certain different sort of definitions of accessibility. So when I say accessible, when we need to make our collections of material accessible, what does that actually mean? So firstly, there is the legislative definition of accessibility. So some of you, I hope a lot of you, are familiar with WCAG, or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So all government institutions who have a website or content online, including yours, should be compliant to these legislative requirements. Basically what they mean, and it's much more detailed than this, but the basic concept is that we must be providing equity of access to all of our community, and that includes people who have learning disabilities or access disabilities, who use assistive technologies to browse the internet. So for example, if they're using screen readers, that kind of thing. It means that all of our content, including files, needs to be accessible to everybody. And so WCAG itself is actually quite complex, so I'm not going to go into too much detail today about what that means, but this has been a big driver for us in terms of the reasons why I'm working on some of the projects that I'm working on, but also why some of the challenges exist. So one of the areas that we've been focusing on is perceivable. So the basic guidelines for WCAG is that all content should be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So what perceivable means, it really focuses on that equity of access. So for example, with audio and visual material, it's not enough to just put an audio file up online. You also have to provide a text-based alternative, so transcript, or even just a text-based summary, a time summary, something like that. It means you're giving an alternate opportunity for someone to access the content who may not be able to listen to the audio material just in and of itself. So this has been a big focus for some of the work that I've been doing. And while, I can send out some links later about more information for WCAG for you, but it is something that we all need to take seriously. And there has been not any cases in relation to libraries or even anyone from the GLAM sector, but there have been actually some quite high-profile court cases in relation to this legislation. The most recent one was against Coles. Their online shopping website was inefficient and not accessible, and someone felt that meant that they were being discriminated against, and Coles lost the case. So, so there is some precedent there, and it is something that we need to be focusing on. So, but when I say our collection should be accessible, it's not just about the legislative requirements. It's actually more than that. It's about how are we providing a meaningful experience for our users? And yes, we can digitize a book and put those images up online, and we've made it accessible. But if we haven't OCR'd that book and provided text versions of that material, have we actually truly made it accessible? Because if a person can't search it, or if Google can't index it and therefore make that file discoverable, are we really truly giving the best experience that we can for our users? So are your materials searchable? Are images browsable by their context or by their keywords? Can you provide text-based alternative for transcripts for audio material that have time codes so that people can, scrub in within an audio file and jump to a certain point in an audio file? All these things are really important in terms of providing that meaningful experience, especially when it comes to research. So, thankfully, there's a lot of ways that we can achieve these things using technology, and it's not necessarily something that has to be overly complicated. So I've got a few examples of how we're doing that here now in the State Library. So OCR, optical character recognition, this is one that you should all be familiar with. So this is creating text-based versions of text or published materials. So a really obvious example of this is Trove, which you'll all be familiar with. Trove is an excellent example of OCRing working very well, and it's also a really great example of crowdsourcing, so inviting your community to actually be a part of this process with you. So, so with Trove, it provides a starting point, and then the community can help us improve that by correcting errors as we're moving along. So we've had quite a lot of experience with crowdsourcing here at the State Library. There's our own digitised newspapers and content on Trove is already available, but we also have some custom platforms that we've been working with here too, such as our transcript tool, which you may be familiar with. This has been built for our handwritten or manuscript collections. So there is technology out there that can OCR handwriting, but it's much more variable, and it's it's still an emerging technology. It's getting better, and I'm really excited to see where this area goes in the next couple of years. But ultimately, handwriting is so variable that the results ultimately are really variable when it comes to trying to automate that in any way. So what we did was we built a platform where we provide the digitised image online. So this is a digitised image of a physical document, and then this is a custom built platform that people can then transcribe that, help us create a text-based version. So this is meeting our WCAG requirements in the sense that we're providing a text-based alternative, but we're relying on crowdsourcing and community input to actually make this happen. So while this has been really interesting and it's been a really successful venture for us, it's not without its challenges and it's not without its barriers. The fact that you actually have to start from scratch, even just in the first instance, to create the transcript in and of itself is a reason that someone might not bother or might find it too difficult. So what we have tried to do over the last couple of years is look at examples of how we can give people something to start with. So what we've been exploring is using machine learning. So at a really broad level, machine learning is a form of artificial intelligence, and it's basically making computers do part of the work for us that we can then do something with on the other end of that as well. So, even though it sounds like super technical, actually machine learning is already a part of your everyday life. So there are services such as Google Maps, Siri, Cortana, so those kind of assistive technologies with your mobile devices. Netflix, so when you're getting your recommendation on Netflix, that is machine learning actually making those decisions for you based on decisions that you yourself have previously made. So the point of machine learning is that it gets better with time, because the more data that you feed in, the more that those algorithms learn, and then ultimately can hopefully make better decisions and better recommendations for you on the other side of that. So an example of how we're using machine learning and technology here is Amplify, which I hope that most of you would be familiar with by now. So Amplify is a platform that delivers digitised audio material from the library's collections, and it's paired with a machine-generated transcript. So users can then come along to Amplify and they can listen to the audio online, but they can also help us correct any errors in the transcripts as they're listening along. So it's very similar to the concept of Trove. So why this was and still is quite significant for us is that we have spent a huge amount of time, money and energy digitising over 13,000 hours from the library's archival oral history material, archive rather. And we digitised it, but we still couldn't make it available online because we didn't have the transcripts and therefore weren't meeting our WCAG compliance requirements. So we had done all this work, but there was no means for us to actually make them available. Human transcription services at this scale, when we're dealing with thousands of files and thousands of hours of material, is prohibitively expensive. And so this was a way of us trying to find an alternate path to being able to make this material available. So this is a screenshot of how Amplify works. So this is from an interview from our collection. So this is the transcript that was created by humans, created by machines, and then humans can then come along and they can listen to the material and literally just make edits as they are listening along. And the different colours just represent the different status of that line in terms of where it is in the editing process. So users can also download a text-based version. So this is literally just the text version of the previous slide. So they can actually download this file and take it away with them. They can print it out. They can save it to their computer. They can use it for research in other ways. So we're providing multiple ways into the material, but ultimately it's not just a crowdsourcing platform. It's a research tool as well. And that's the really important and powerful thing that Amplify is providing that we have not been able to provide before. So another project that I have been working on that uses machine learning technology is called Tiger. Tiger, what does it stand for? Tagging images generically for exploration and research. We basically just picked an animal and found an acronym that would fit in there. So basically what we're doing is we're using 3 different commercial off-the-shelf services to tag images, so photographs, paintings, so digitised material from the collections, and trying to tag them and identify what is actually happening within the frame of that image. So why this has been really important for us is because we mostly, there are always exceptions, but for the most part we catalogue our image and or pictorial collections at the album level, so as a group, and so they have subject headings applied as a group, but we don't have what we call file level metadata, which is individual image data about specific images. There are exceptions to that, as I said, so there are collections where we have done this, but that has mostly been because they were either born digital and so we already had material material about them, or they were deemed to be a really significant collection and therefore worthy of actually spending the time and energy to catalogue them in that way. So I've just got some examples here to show you of how this actually works. So the image on the left there, so with the horse and the wagon, so we use 3 commercial services, so Google, Amazon and Microsoft. They're just 3 commercial off-the-shelf services. And what we have done is we run each image through that process, and they generate different keyword tags to identify what's happening in an image. So on that, and then, the tigering process is we then basically synthesize that raw data, and we try and extrapolate what the most relevant terms are. So we were finding that with some of the raw data, I mean, you get some highly accurate results, and then some pretty crappy, useless kind of results at the other end of that scale. So what we do with our Tiger algorithm is we compare the results we get from the 3 services, and then we pull out the best. We kind of try and get the Tiger list at the end, which is what we feel is most representative and most accurate in terms of what's happening within the image. So you can see here with that image on the left that a machine was able to identify, look at this image with no context. We didn't give any metadata. It doesn't even have a file name. It literally was able to look at that image and identify that there's animals, horses and mammals. There's a wagon, horse, cart, vehicle, transportation, and even down to the wheel of the wagon. So it really can really hone into specific detail within the image. The number that you see next to each tag there is basically the percentage, how accurate it thinks that tag is. So across the 3 services, they were 99.84% accurate. There was a horse or horses in that image. So where I think it starts to get really interesting is actually in the right-hand example. So it's tagged person and man. Like that's really, I mean, yes, it's accurate, that's true, but probably people aren't just searching for men in the collection. That would be boring. But what is really fascinating is that it was able to identify that one of them is holding a drum and a musical instrument. So this is where we really start to see the value, that if someone was doing research about musical instruments over time, this image is relevant to them, and therefore we're adding value because there's no information in the catalogue record that's associated with this image that has anything to do with drums or that has anything to even do with musical instruments. So just a couple more examples. So in that left one there, I think it's really fascinating that not only can we identify that it's an insect, but that it is actually a flea. So it was able to extrapolate that from just purely from analysing the image. And same on the right-hand example there. And this is another really interesting one. This is obviously not a photograph, it is an artwork, and not only were they still able, the services we used, able to pull some interesting detail out of that, it was able to identify that it is actually an artwork and not a photograph, and that the hat that she's wearing is a bonnet and not just a hat, or, I mean, hat is there too, but I thought it was quite fascinating that you can really get down to the granular detail. The one on the left is an interesting example because this is actually a black and white photograph that has then been hand coloured. The whole series is like that. So this has been hand coloured with sepia and in a sepia tone, and actually washes out a lot of the detail. And yet the services that we were able to use, they were able to identify that not only is there a rowboat in the image, but that there are people sitting in the rowboat. So I thought that was quite fascinating. And on the right-hand example there, I mean, I think we can look at this image and go, okay, this is an aerial view, landscape view from a plane, but you're actually only seeing a very small portion of the plane in the image. And so to me, it would have been quite acceptable if the machine services that we were using couldn't identify that, but it had absolutely no trouble identifying that this was an aerial view of a landscape from a plane or an aircraft. So that's all really interesting and nifty, but how does this actually apply in terms of the research process? So this is a screenshot of our Derby collection. So this is from the catalogue record. Derby really liked birds. And if we just take a look at the subject headings that were applied to this collection. So this is just a screenshot from the collection record. So this was catalogued at the album level. So those subject headings you can see there, you can see things like birds, New South Wales, art, colonial. Because we didn't describe each image at the item level or at the image level, those subject headings ultimately just apply to all the children within that parent. From the parent record. So, I mean, it is obviously capturing the essence of that collection, that the colonial art mostly related to birds. But when we run, because we can run each of these different images through our Tiger process, so we can actually analyze each image individually, and then what we can do is get results like this. So it means that I can now tell our users that there's a pelican and this particular photograph and not a cockatoo or not another type of bird. So this is where the value really becomes apparent, because it's not to say that if someone was searching pelicans that they couldn't have found it through our traditional process, but what they would have had to do is search for pelican, and it would only have come up assuming that that word somewhere had been mentioned in the description of that catalogue record, and then they would have gotten back to that previous screen with all the images of the birds and then had to go through and find the pelican themselves and assume there must be a pelican there because that result set has come up. But this is sort of flipping it the other way and putting the image first and going, actually, I can take you straight to the image of the pelican. And then they can then go back up and get the broader context of where this pelican has come from in terms of the Derby collection and all of the information that we've captured about that collection itself. So if there's anything that you take away from my very brief chat today, it's that accessibility does not equal perfection, and I think that this is a really important thing that we all need to take stock of. The projects that we've been working on are not about creating the perfect record, about creating the perfect text-based alternative or creating the perfect image tags. It's not about that. Ultimately, it's just about providing more detail, more ways in, and a more meaningful research experiences, which comes back to what I feel is the true meaning of accessibility in terms of our collections. So there's a really interesting quote here that has come up quite a lot in the research and the work that we've been doing over the last few years. It's from Doug Ord, and basically this was in the context of oral histories and transcripts. So it basically says that, okay, yeah, a 25% error rate in a transcription probably would make it a bit of a crappy reading experience for a human being, but it doesn't diminish the value of that record because it can still be searched, it can still be indexed, and it will still capture hopefully the main themes of that particular collection record or piece of material. And this is really how we've been working here with the projects that we've been doing here at the library. It's that when it's not about perfection, it's not about creating a perfect transcript. When we look at Amplify, we wouldn't have been able to provide access to those materials at all if it wasn't using an incorrect or a slightly incorrect machine-generated version. And so, if we look at the statistics that we've been seeing with Amplify since we launched, these are actually probably about 2 months old now, but we've had roughly 13,000 sessions from over 6,000 users from 61 different countries, and as of a couple of months ago, we've had over 200,000 corrections on Amplify, and 126 transcripts have been completed in full. So if we look at that international reach, because this to me really gets to the heart of why these projects are so important, this sort of represents the different visitation that we've had on Amplify since we launched. But with all the work that we've done with digitisation and the preservation and around our audio collection, if it wasn't for Amplify, that map would look like this, and there would only be a dot on Sydney, because people would still have had to come into the library here in Macquarie Street and request to access the material to actually listen to it. So we have found through these learnings, and this was an assumption from the beginning, that users would rather something that's not quite accurate or not quite 100% accurate in terms of the record, rather than not getting access at all. And I think that we have found that we're getting more and more used to examples of machine learning in everyday life, that people aren't necessarily expecting perfection. I mean, if you look at closed caption television, for example, I've seen lots of examples of that where it's not quite right, but people accept that it's useful for what it is, even if a human being isn't actually writing the closed captions themselves. So in terms of how this applies to you and how you can bring these things into your library, so you may have heard that we have been running a pilot project with Amplify with public libraries across New South Wales. It was been running over the last 6 to 8 months. It wrapped up about 2 months ago. It was a really successful pilot. We piloted building out a new version of Amplify, which now can host the collections of other institutions. We partnered with 4 public libraries from New South Wales. So we had Wagga Wagga, Wollongong, Ryde and Central West libraries, some of who are here today. So if you're interested in finding out more about their experiences, I'm happy to put you in touch with people who've actually been a part of the project. But in my opinion, I think it was really, really successful. And what we're now able to do is roll that out to all libraries in New South Wales. We will be putting some comms out about this in the next couple of months, probably next month actually. So keep an ear out for that, because we are really keen to support you in getting your material on Amplify. We will support you from a technical point of view, and also we'll be able to help subsidise you in terms of getting your material up onto Amplify. So you'll be using our platform to promote your own materials, but it's 100% your material. You'll work with your community, and then what you'll ultimately be able to do is provide access to your audio materials, but then also help your community, or get your community's help rather, to actually get the transcriptions completed for your materials as well. Here are some links that I've put up. This is just a very small sampling of what's out there for you, but I really, really encourage you to just start experimenting. It doesn't have to be on a huge scale. You don't necessarily need a huge amount of funding or anything like that. Amplify itself was just an idea that myself and a colleague had maybe 3 years ago, and it just started from something small and has grown from there really organically, and it's been a really, really interesting and exciting process to go through that. But some of the examples I've got here, so for OCR, so online OCR is literally just a free online OCRing tool. You can just upload images or of your your published material, a photograph of a book, and it will spit out an OCR text file for you, and it's completely free. Abby is another one. It's actually paid. I can't remember off the top of my head how much it is, but it was inexpensive, but the results are just slightly better because you're paying for the service rather than getting a free one. So there's some really good results that you can get from that. For machine transcription, so this is voice to text. So VoiceBase is actually the service that we use as well. It's really, really inexpensive. It's about 2 cents per minute. So you could get 100 hours for next to nothing transcribed. The caveat to that is because it's so cheap, the quality can be quite variable. I've seen some excellent results from VoiceBase, and that's usually has come from a digital-born, well-recorded, very clear quality interview. I've also seen some really crappy results as well because it was a poor quality audio recording. Trint is another example that is actually quite heavily used within the oral history community. It is machine generated, but it's much more expensive. It's about $2 a minute, but the results are absolutely fantastic. So it's worth even having an experiment with, even if you're just doing just 1 or 2 audio files just to see what you get, because the quality is really good and they've got a really nice editing interface as well. For image tagging, there's just 3 examples there. They're all paid services, but they all have a trial or like a test area where you can upload your own images and get tags back. The Google Cloud Vision one, which is one of the services we use, is really interesting because it doesn't just do image tagging, it gives you quite a lot of other really nifty functionalities as well. So for example, I was uploading images of the Sydney Harbour Bridge and getting results back with the Sydney Harbour Bridge pinned on Google Maps. So it actually can identify a physical location based on significant sites from around the world. So there's some really interesting stuff you can do with that data, and it's really worth having a play around with. But also what I've added up there is just some platforms on how you can actually facilitate the engagement, because that's the other part of it. It's all well and good to play around with creating the data, but if you want to get your community involved, those are 2 platforms that you can use to do that. So Zooniverse is really good, and I'm hoping to be able to start using it here soon. But it's basically just a platform that's completely free. You subscribe to it, you add your content there, and you just you can use that as your link and bring your community there, and they do all the work for you in terms, like Zooniverse do all the work for you in terms of providing templates and all that. So you could go back to your offices tomorrow and create a Zooniverse account for free, upload some material for free, and get started with just a really small pilot project. And I think that actually getting your hands dirty and starting to work on some of these different experimental projects is a really good way of convincing other people of the value, and that's exactly what we did here and what we'll continue to do for new ideas as they come up as well. Thank you. That's it.
Questions for Jenna?
Angela from Ride. With Tiger, how much time do you then have to spend to go in and look at the tags and then edit out the ones that you don't want to use?
So none. So the whole point has been, it hasn't been done to date. So what we wanted to do, and the whole reason we created the algorithm on the top of it, is so that we wouldn't have to do any moderation. So where we've kind of landed is we have seen ones like, for example, man, person, those kind of more generic ones. I mean, they're not wrong, or the fact that the Pelican one was also tagged with animal. It's not wrong, but it's really not that useful. But the compromise that we've made is we'll try and use our algorithm to filter out as much of that kind of noise as possible, and then hope that we're getting kind of the cream on the top of that, so that even if words like animal get in, well, it might be just sort of irrelevant, but it's not actually wrong, so we'll just leave it. So we have done quite a lot of testing and sort of reconfiguring the algorithm to get where we are now. But the ultimate goal is that we'll actually start making those tags available to the public without actually any moderation, because the algorithm that we've run through the Tiger process is the moderation.
Jane from Cumberland. Just on the back of what Angela was saying, I just want to say, can you also add things into it as well as just accepting what comes in? Because, say, for one of the examples you showed up there with the AMP building, it didn't mention the fact that it was the AMP building on the stage, which I think would be actually quite of interest to someone who was doing research. They would want to know that.
Yep.
You would need to have that tag in there.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So we will be presenting those tags alongside the subject tags that have already been catalogued. So it's not replacing them, and it's certainly not trying to compete with them. They're actually to complement each other. But in the case of that one, well, that tag doesn't apply to that image anywhere because they weren't catalogued at that level. So what we would like to be able to do is take captions and other metadata that we have about images when we have it, and actually convert that into tags that can be used, that can be searchable as well. That's sort of it's a more complex process because it's less machine driven and has to be more human driven, but it is something we've talked about at length. And what I would ultimately like to be able to do is take metadata that we already have and apply it to images in that way, so that we can use it for search. But ultimately, if it's in the catalogue record, it will still be indexed. The tags are really just trying to pull out details about individual images that we had captured nowhere else. Yeah.
Anyone else with a question? Okay, please join me in thanking Jenna. And just briefly, while I have to change the streaming option, stand and stretch, because it's a good thing to do, and share with someone near you, not someone who you know you've worked with, etc. Which of those platforms that Jenna listed that you think you'll be trying in the next week or two? If you had mythical time. Or otherwise, what would you try in the next 2 months?